So yeah, thank you everybody for taking the time to join us today. I know it's a very strange time in the world, and I hope you're all safe and your families are safe as well. We thought we'd try to make some good use of the time when maybe people aren't going about their normal business, and try to use this time to keep our education going. And as as the world comes back to some kind of normality, we can all go back to doing our jobs, to helping people in the best way we can, maybe with some new knowledge. So we've kicked off a series of webinars. Our plan over the next weeks will be to hold 2 webinars a week. I think we have the next 3 planned in our mind, but we're really open to ideas. So if anybody has any topics that you'd like to cover over the next weeks, we'd be really happy to pull some expertise together and really talk about any topics that you'd like to. We have another webinar on Thursday, which will cover the new PS2 100 product. This is a new small pumping system, a self-install product. And next week, we'll also be talking about our new HR pumps, the HR Evolution pumps. So that's what we've got planned for next Tuesday. You'll see some invitations to join those webinars coming through. So yeah, let's talk a little bit about today's webinar. So we're going to talk about smartTAP water dispensers. I'll do a short introduction so everybody's at the same level on the smartTAP. I know some of you have been really active with this product, others not so. So maybe I'll do a quick leveling session so everyone understands what we're talking about. We want to spend most of the time sharing some success stories, and really importantly today will be to get into a Q&A as well. So I'll maybe talk for 20-25 minutes, and then we'll get into a Q&A session. So just to help you a little bit with the technology, everyone should be able to ask questions. The software keeps everybody on mute, and we can open it up if people would like to have some discussions later, but it tends to get difficult with nearly 100 people on the call at the moment, so that will get a bit complicated. What I would suggest we do is, if you've got questions as I'm going through, type the questions in. There should be a question box on your screen, and what I'll do is try to answer as many of those as I can as I go through the content, and then any that I can't pick up, we'll talk about at the end. So maybe in 25 minutes time when I've gone through the pre-prepared content. Good. So I think we've got a good number joined now. So I think we'll start through the content. So as I remind you, you're all on mute. Please type the questions in as we go through. I'll start off with a reminder of what the smartTAP is. Hopefully you would have seen some of the content we've put out in the videos. I want to give a little bit of background to why it was developed, because when we start to talk to customers and look at where we implement the smartTAP, it's really good to think back of why it was developed and why we've been through the last 3.5 years of development of this product and why we did that. We'll then look at the key uses and the example projects that we've prepared here. And we've picked 3 projects to talk about today because they are quite typical of the projects that are being done all around the world. So there'll be good examples, and hopefully there's something there you can relate to. So let's talk a little bit about the smartTAP water dispensers and get into our minds how this is typically deployed. So we like to talk about sustainable water infrastructure. And of course, sustainability means that, yes, we can talk about environmental sustainability, but when we talk about water infrastructure, what's really important is that it's sustainable for the long term. So this means it has to be financially sustainable, and it also has to be operationally sustainable. So that means that firstly, there's money generated to keep the water flowing to the users, to the beneficiaries of the water. It also means that to operate and expand, so to maintain and expand the system, you need to have some money or funding to do that. And as we all know, if any infrastructure that's not supported financially will break down, And if the community either aren't in a good place financially to fix something, or there isn't a structure in place to fix something, nothing gets fixed. And we all know the examples of broken water infrastructure. So to make something sustainable, yes, it has to be environmentally sustainable, but it also has to be commercially and operationally sustainable too. So to achieve that, we're normally, of course, going to use a borehole, or we could be using piped water from city water, from the National Water Company, to provide out to our customers. We're often going to use a solar pump. Again, the reason you're on the call here is because you know that solar pumps are a great idea. You know that solar pumps have low operating costs. You know that solar pumps are the best solution for almost most pumping projects in the world. We're going to normally pump to storage. So if we're not on a city piped water connection, we're going to normally pump to a storage tank. Again, this is to make sure that the drinking water application is there 24 hours per day. And we're going to take our water out to our water dispensers. The idea of the water dispenser, of course, is that we have firstly accountability for water. So it doesn't matter whether people are paying or not, it's about accountability. So we can decide who has how much water per day. We can decide how much we charge for water. And importantly, that all of the users within the community have common and equal access. So this is about making sure that water is fairly distributed as well. So that's what we look at when we have an end-to-end sustainable water system. Of course, with the LORENTZ products, we're also managing and monitoring all these things remotely. We have the technology that pulls all of this together to common dashboards for the customers. And so we really can build for them, using all of our products together, this end-to-end sustainable water idea. And of course, along with the technology must come the business models and operations to do that, which is where we'll get to at the end here. So there are three key places where the smartTAP is a logical add-on, either to a solar pump or completely independently to any piped water service. So again, I must stress at this point, it's great to see the model that we saw on the page before, where we have a whole end-to-end LORENTZ solution, but it's also quite common that the smartTAPs are being used on existing water infrastructure. So this could be boreholes with electric pumps. It could be, a piped water connection. And again, all areas of the world can use this product. This is not a product specifically for developing countries. It's also being used in some quite creative applications across the world. So the first use, of course, is anywhere that you want to collect revenue in this public, in a public or shared area. So anywhere there is a water point that is being shared by multiple people. So again, this could be, it could be in a refugee camp, it could be in a rural community, or it could be on a camping site somewhere in a national park. So this could really cover lots of different applications, but anywhere where you have a water point that's used by multiple people, so not a in-house meter connection, then the smartTAP makes sense. Of course, if you have lots of people using one water connection, it's very difficult to meter and monitor. It's very difficult to collect revenue, and the smartTAP does this. So simply taking any shared water point in a community, replace the existing tap that's there with the smartTAP, you then have revenue collection. If we look at lots of the utility companies, they all have a non-revenue water problem. This is their measurement of how much water they deliver to their customers versus how much they get paid for. And if we look at many of the utilities in developing countries, they can have up to 75% non-revenue water. So that means 75% of the water they deliver, they don't get any revenue for. And this is has a mixture of reasons. So of course, pipe leakage is one factor, so poor infrastructure. Another factor is, of course, people stealing water, so illegal tapping. This is actually a really small amount. But one of the biggest issues is there isn't a good mechanism to collect revenue, particularly in shared community models. And there have obviously been some products that try to do this before. They're really too expensive and complicated, but the smartTAP can really help. So the second use is in waste reduction. And of course, if you think about, as soon as we put a value onto something, so putting a value onto water, and even giving people an allowance means that people tend not to waste things. We see a real change in the way people behave from using a tap, even if they're not paying. If as soon as they're starting to use the smartTAP and they have a token which monitors or gives them a daily limit for water, water's used very wisely. There's no spillage of water on the floor, and so waste is really significantly reduced. And the third use, which kind of brings the two together, is about fair water entitlement. So water is a finite resource. Of course, it's critical for all of us to live water, and there is a human right, of course, to have access to water. I think the best way I would describe it is there isn't a human right to have unlimited access to unlimited amounts of water that's not used wisely. So making sure that everybody has enough water to survive is, of course, a moral obligation that we have. Giving people unlimited access to unlimited amounts of water is, of course, not the same thing. So finding mechanisms to be able to give people the water they need, and also allowing them access to more water should they need it for commercial purposes, etc., then finding that way to operate is really smart. So we make sure everyone has the water they need. We make sure we leave no one behind by giving them allowances, giving them the social safety net if we need to do that, but also then allowing people that want to use really vast amounts of water for different applications, they can also do that and contribute commercially to do it. So we can work on lots of different modes, and we'll give you some more examples of this later. So they're the principles of where we're using it. Just have a quick reminder of the product itself then. So our dispenser is a self-contained unit. Of course, it's from LORENTZ, so it's solar powered. It has inside an integrated battery charger. It comes shipped with its own small PV module, comes with a PV module bracket, comes with a cable to connect the PV module. And so literally by pulling a water pipe in the bottom here and connecting its PV module, you then have a smartTAP working. It is has a high flow rate, so internally it has very low losses. It'll operate on systems down to 0.1 bar, so really 1 meter of head the product will work. And so it's very easy to replace any shared water point with the smartTAP. This is all our own design, so all of the software, hardware we've built ourselves. It integrates very nicely with solar pumps, but as I mentioned earlier, it also works really well if you have piped water systems, whether that's in a city or rural area. And of course, it's been designed to be fit for purpose, as you would expect, with our 25 years of working on off-grid products. So it's built to be tough. It's built to work in all the heat, humidity that you would expect in the most difficult areas. And its security is really good. So we have good physical security, and we have really amazing digital security to keep this safe. I talked about why we designed it, and of course when we started looking at this 4 years ago now, we thought actually a dispenser would make sense to go alongside our solar pumps. One of the key challenges with a solar pump, of course, is we all know it makes sense commercially, but typically there's maybe a 2 to 3 year payback against some diesel solutions when we're looking at new infrastructure. That gets better all the time with solar prices going down, and of course our prices being competitive makes that helpful. but there is still a slight difference. And lots of the funding to install solar pumps is a little bit slow, particularly for some of the larger utilities. So we wanted to find a way of ensuring that we could guarantee a revenue stream alongside the investment in the solar pump, and water dispensers made sense. We looked around the market to see if we could just partner with somebody, but actually the technology we saw we didn't think was appropriate for scaling, either through the design of it physically or the security methods involved, or simply the price point was too high. So we did a lot of research with this, worked with the World Bank, for instance, to come up with a product which was affordable, which would always work off-grid. We probably know, as well as you do, trying to install products that rely on network connectivity in remote places is really not so easy. So we really did a unique thing and designed this to work both online, but also it will work completely offline. So even if we have no connectivity, we're really in the middle of nowhere, our product's still working when you're 50 kilometers away from the nearest cell phone signal. So this makes it really easy to scale. You don't have to get too complicated in planning. You can really put it anywhere. If you have connectivity, great. If you don't have connectivity, it really doesn't matter. There's no loss in user experience, information capture, or security in the system. It works both on and off grid. So we designed down to a price point. Again, working with the World Bank, it was we did some modeling to say, what would we need to do to produce a product which would scale really on a mass scale across the world? How can we solve the world's drinking water problem by adding in a product that guarantees a revenue stream and makes people accountable for water? So we came up with some pricing. Our target was $1,000 list price, and as you all know, we hit that price point with this product. So that was done very specifically based on modeling to say, how can this become, not a few thousand units a year, but how can this really become something that changes the way people install systems and provide water? And of course, we have our magical little tag. So the tag that we use, this is the NFC tag. This is actually a smart device. So this is not this is the wallet for the customer. This is the small device that lets people get water from the dispenser. It's actually a very clever little device. It not only holds how much money that the person has on their token, but it also holds profiles. So we can hold things like, I mentioned the idea that one family's tag could give them 50 litres free per day because they were really economically challenged or needed help socially. That can be held on the tag. If someone is sick, for instance, the doctor could prescribe onto their tag water for an amount of time. So the tag is not just an identifier of the person, it actually securely holds how much credit they have, what services they're allowed to access, and all of that is held on this little tag. As you can see, it's actually a little computer. It's remotely powered. It doesn't have a battery, so it's powered via the antenna that you can see here. This kind of gold circle. It's a copper coil. It's powered up, very secure. It talks to the smartTAP. The two talk to each other. Again, everything's secured very well. You can't copy the tag, you can't replicate it, you can't manipulate it. This is the highest security NFC device class in the world at the moment. So very long life. It's wireless. We don't need to worry about it getting wet or hot. This just works, identifies the user, and tells the smartTAP what services, how much water they can have. So very simple to use. Good. So that's just hopefully got everyone back up to speed with the technology. We're going to send out a newsletter later this week with some links that for anybody that's kind of either hasn't installed the products yet or hasn't been selling them actively, there's a lot more information and links there that can kind of catch you up to where we are. So there's some really good videos. There's some training information. We're working on some installation videos at the moment as well. But yeah, there'll be a newsletter coming that explains more about the product, where to find information on it. So what I'm going to do now is start to talk about a couple of examples of the smartTAP in use. So these are success stories, and I'll explain, they're quite different. I'll explain why they've been chosen. So the first one, and this is something you may have seen already, there is a video available on this particular project. And I wanted to bring it up because it's a really good example and one that's been replicated many times, but this was one of the first installations we did. This is about 2.5 years old nearly. And this was actually our first design hardware. So this was our version 1 hardware, if you want. And this was actually a field trial site for our first connected products. And it's a really nice story. It's a community hospital in Tanzania, but I chose this because we have lots of other installations for local communities. So these are typically community run projects. So run by, for instance, a local water committee. So this is a really good example that fits well, and we have really good data for this one, so I wanted to share it. So the whole story here is Shirati Hospital. It's a hospital in Tanzania. It's actually run or funded by a US charitable organization. They provide lots of funding for the hospital. It's really at the heart of the community. And one of the first projects we did several years ago with them was to install a solar pump. So replacing their existing electric pump with a solar pump. And this was a really nice project. They saw their $9,000 savings. The normal story from going from diesel powered electric pumps to solar pumps, they saw their operational savings. They saw 18 months payback on their pump already. But what they also saw is they really had an excess of water. So by installing the solar pump, they had an excess of water, and they wanted to find a way of getting this out to the local community. The first thing they did was put in some standpipes and did what many communities do, employed water sellers that would stand at the locked standpipe. They would come out in the morning at 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, unlock the standpipe, and sell water for cash to the local community. So this is common, I think, in many places. This is a very typical application that we would replace a person standing in front of a locked tap every day, usually cash transactions for buckets of water, and we replace that role with smartTAPs. And you can see in the picture here, we've got 3 smartTAPs in this location. And we can see there's both the local community coming to collect their own water. And there's also some entrepreneurs here which are coming and collecting more water and then taking it a little bit further by bicycle to other surrounding communities a few kilometers away. So this particular site here is being used for direct customers in the local vicinity, and also for these almost water traders here as well. So what we saw from this implementation is they're generating about $12,000 a year from selling this excess water. So they have a market here, although this is actually very close to a lake. The lake water is not drinkable. The borehole water is obviously very good. They're selling the water, they're generating about $12,000 a year. Excellent service for the community, and of course more funds for the hospital to carry on the good work they're doing. This project is actually just going through an extension, so I think we're adding another 6 dispensers on at the moment. What we can see is the data we collect from this is amazing. We can see exactly how the usage of water changes. So How much do people really collect each day? We can see exactly how this changes through the seasons. So you would expect maybe much less water to be collected during rainy season. Actually, it only goes down by about 15%. So things we learned from this very early on in terms of people's willingness to pay, ability to pay. If we added more dispensers, what did that do? Looking at queuing times, looking at all these things, you really have incredible data coming from the devices here. They really monitor every transaction. We know exactly what's going on. The other benefit, of course, you get is 24-hour-a-day access. So when they had the vendors standing there and selling water, this was basically an 8 till 6 daily operation. Now people can come and collect water at any time of the day or night. So this is open 24 hours a day. Again, this reduces queuing time. It means that people will change their water collection behavior. So it means that people will not go and get 40 litres in the morning and leave that sitting around all day. It means people will just come along and collect really a small amount of water when they need it. The closer the smartTAPs are to people's houses, of course, the more regularly they visit them. So when we're doing some planning, and you'll see this in the next some of the next slides, when we're planning some of the larger rollouts, we're really trying to look at how can we get dispensers within something like a 200-meter radius of people's houses, because this really is allows them to come and collect just a saucepan for cooking dinner or just a few litres at a time, and means you don't have large volumes of water sitting around in open containers all day with the risks of further contamination. Yeah, so all of this is really, really good to be able to see the data, and I think it's the first time for many communities, and when we're working with NGOs or working with utilities, it's the first time they can really see the user behavior. All of the shared water points has always been a little bit of a mystery. There are assumptions as to what really happens. When you've got people using the tag and using the dispensers, you can really see what's happening. Good. So this project and many like it are out there. I'm just quickly checking the questions coming in here, so we can see if I can answer any as we go along. Yeah. So there's a couple of questions. Just before I move forward, one's around filtering. So the smartTAPs themselves are doing no water cleaning or filtration. Again, it's not really a logical place to do it. The logical place to do water treatment would be at a central point. So you would try to, if you need to do any residual chlorination or you need to do any filtration or treatment, you would do that at the center. So if you remember the second slide we had where we had the storage tank, it would make sense to do cleaning before you put water into the tank, and maybe then dosing chlorination, depending on the water and the situation locally. You might want to do a chlorination dosing at the outlet of the tank. Actually, experience for most places is this is typically not done. The water's good. The amount of water used per day means that even secondary chlorination is not done often. Obviously, when we're moving to much higher density populations, again, examples like refugee camps, of course, there's chlorination done then. In many of the rural situations, there isn't any chlorination. The device doesn't actually have a physical filter in it either. As I mentioned, it's designed for very full flow, and we found very early on that adding in filters actually caused a maintenance problem rather than saving one. We use a very high power solenoid valve inside, which opens really wide. It doesn't require pressure to open it, so it's a self-actuating valve, which really doesn't have any clogging problems. What we find is if we put if you have small particles of sand or anything in the water, it's actually better to let the water that flush through than try to filter it out. If you try to filter it out, you create yourself a bigger maintenance problem. Other questions so far we've had here, does it come in terms of different sizes? We actually have one size of product. Again, we've designed the unit to allow different sizes of hydraulic circuit inside, but we don't at the moment haven't introduced anything bigger. We've found that this fits really most drinking water applications. We do have inquiries about something larger for maybe filling tankers or filling livestock troughs, where it's people want to have a single quick fill of a livestock trough. But at the moment, that's a relatively small number of requests and really needs something designed differently. The product's designed really, you have to also think about how many people can use it per day in terms of cross-contamination, and always, of course, having a backup for these things when you're in a community environment. So this really is serving a very wide audience. Maximum flow rate in litres per minute, can it be? Yep, so it's designed to work from 0.1 to 3 bar in normal operation. At 1 bar, I'm doing this from the top of my head now, I think we've got 35 litres per minute flow rate at 1 bar. So most water systems will be in that 1 to 1.5 bar range. But down at 0.1 bar, we're at something like 20 litres a minute. So we still can operate down at very low pressures. Is there any financing model? So we don't have a direct financing model, but we have really good examples and data of where the product is being used. And of course, many of the schemes we have now financial data and operational data for. And where we can share that, this really helps to show banks or investors how attractive this is. So there's good data now that's put together which would allow this to be shared. Again, some of this can be named to certain customers, some of it would have to be anonymized, but I think we've got a good business case template in Excel, and we have a really good idea on what figures work, what the costs are for operations, good operational data now to say what the likelihood of breakdowns and service are. So we have all of that data now really in a good shape. And the cost of the tags. So the cost of the tags is, you'll be able to see these in your price list. The list price on the tags is something like $4. Again, sorry to do this from the top of my head. It's around $4 a list price, so everybody understands the discounts from there. The reason the tag price is relatively high is the security topic I mentioned. And I would really flag this as a big warning to everybody, and this is an important point. If you're talking to customers about choosing their water dispenser technology, there are lots of products out there at the moment where we looked at them and their security is appalling. You can download an app from the Play Store and basically copy their tokens. So you can download an app. Most of the technology they're using was hacked 4 or 5 years ago now. You can basically take one token, load it with credit, and just duplicate it. So I would say digitally, there is no security on many of the systems that are out there. So you have to take this quite seriously. Of course, if you're operating in a very remote area where there is no technology, this is not a problem. As soon as you start to deploy on a wider scale, so as soon as you go from a small donor project for a church or something in a very remote area with 1,000 beneficiaries, security is less of an issue. As soon as you start to roll this out across a country, as soon as you start to get high volumes of the product out there, then it's open for hackers to just be selling on every bazaar or marketplace preloaded tokens for these meters. So you really lose complete control of revenue collection. And so your challenge is when you get hacked, you not only need to replace all of the tokens, you would need to replace all of the dispensers. We took the view that if we wanted this product to be successful, it must be secure. It must be secure if it wants to scale across a whole country or even a nation. And the risk of someone hacking it must be absolutely minimized. I mean, really taken down to zero. So we're using the same technology that's used on many mass transit systems. So it's the systems that are used, for instance, on the London transport network. And again, if you think of the costs that those organisations have with their hundreds of millions of customers using trains, subways and things, the costs of not only being hacked, but the cost of replacing all of the infrastructure is billions of dollars. So we decided early on that we would adopt the same level of technology and security and picked basically the highest standards, because as this is rolled out, we want it to be good for years to come and not need to be replaced. Good, so let's carry on to the next example, and we will cover some of the other questions in the next ones. I can see some of them will already be coming up. So for anyone that's worried, the recording of the presentation will be available afterwards as well for you. So you'll get a link to download this. If any of your colleagues have missed it, they'll also be able to see what we're talking about today. So let's move on from a community example to a rural utility. And again, the story's slightly similar. The scale's different, of course. So here we're talking about a rural utility. They're still actually in what they call a trial phase, but this is 300,000 people that are being served, across a whole country. So we have dispensers installed in all of the regions of this particular utility. I can't name them today. We're still on an announcement. We're not allowed to announce this probably for another 3 months, I think, fully. This is something we installed last year. So we have 300,000 people using the smartTAPs for all of their water needs. They have a fixed water tariff. So again, they've gone from a mixture really of communities where this was either very poor infrastructure, the utility really couldn't fund extending this to more communities, or communities where they were operating with people, so water vendors selling water. And so they've made the transition from the water vendor model to using the smartTAPs. And one of the questions I wanted, is why I left it for this one, was what happens when you have a person that used to be the water vendor and you replace them with a machine? Yeah, so this whole debate across the world of what do we do about the people who haven't now got a job? So the first thing we saw is, of course, there are different jobs now available with this scheme. So typically, although you replace a person with a blue machine, there still are different tasks to be done. So for instance, some of those vendors have actually become local vendors to sell water credits onto the tags. So they're now taking a slightly different role rather than collecting cash. And to be honest, collecting cash in a way that means, they have two. They always say that the water vendor has two pockets. He collects some for the water scheme and some for himself. So what we see firstly is all revenue is collected. So this can go from 25% improvement to 100% improvement in revenue collection. From one of the schemes, it was mentioned, since we introduced this, we sell twice as much water. Actually, they sell exactly the same amount of water. They now get paid for it all. So we remove the human, we remove the challenge of having two pockets, and of course we have traceability of every transaction. So this is the first improvement. We redeploy the people that were sitting there selling water for cash with we changed their roles into some of them still selling water, but not sitting at the water point with a key and a tap, but now actually selling this using a smartphone. So they're using a smartphone app. People are coming with cash or mobile money. It's whatever they want to do, and they transact with the water vendor locally still. So this works still in high cash economies as well as mobile money integration. So they've got a job doing that. Others are taking a job of still keeping the dispensers clean. Of course, it's good to keep everything clean and tidy, sterilizing delivery pipes, this kind of work. So there are jobs for everybody typically, and the jobs change a little, but everyone gets involved. So with this utility, they have a fixed tariff now across all communities. So this used to vary, and people used to walk further distances to get water from somewhere that was cheaper. It has actually removed some local, I would say, illegal sellers. Of course, every market rises to meet a need. But again, on 3 of the projects I've visited here, actually the illegal sellers, I'll call them, the unofficial sellers locally, have also been integrated and been given roles within the water schemes. So they've actually managed to lower the prices overall because of collecting revenue everywhere, so extended their ability to collect money, lowered the tariff actually for everybody, so everyone now pays less than they were paying before, and they have a really good water service that's serving far more people. They also have gained since this another loan from World Bank. So World Bank have also been very happy then to lend against an extension to this because they can see the revenue coming in. And this is working, as I said, across kind of a central organization with 10 regions and then thousands of local communities here. And all of this data is real time, see online exactly how much water is being transacted, exactly who sold what credits, etc. So this is full transparency for everybody. And again, if we think about either institutional investors, we think about government investment or commercial investment, if you can show these transactions real time, you can see the end to end, every single litre of water, who used it, who paid for it. This makes it very transparent and easy to borrow against. Yeah, so that's the rural utility model. And again, questions are pinging in, so let me see if I can quickly answer a few of those. Just try and get to grips with the technology here. Here we are. Okay, so we have there's a few questions about pressure. We are going to do can it be powered by AC? So this is a designed, the question here is, can it be powered by AC if the DC power fails? So we have inside it, as I mentioned, we have a PV module. So it's a small 10-watt module that charges the device. Actually, from the picture here, you can see the pole. The pole is here, and actually the small module is up here, out of children's hands, not quite out of their throwing distance, but certainly out of their handling distance. So we also, of course, have inside the device a battery. So we're using a standard MP7 battery, something that's available everywhere in the world at low cost. And the device actually has 3 days autonomy. So even if it's dark for 3 days, the device works 24 hours per day. So it has good autonomy. We do have some applications where people don't want to use solar power, and they're using just a standard kind of plug top power pack. So just an AC/DC plug top power pack. But again, it's designed to be off grid. This is clear. yeah, can you turn it off? Can you turn it on? So we have schedules where we can do all these things. We can even program the device to change tariffs. So one example would be you basically can have like a happy hour. One of the systems that we installed fairly early on, they had very small amount of storage tanks. They were running on solar pumps, but with small amount of storage. And in the initial installation, to try to serve people better, they tried to remove the early in the morning collection of water because the tanks were becoming empty and upsetting the customers. So what we implemented was between 11 o'clock in the morning and 1 o'clock in the afternoon, so a 2-hour window where you can receive 50% more water per credit. So basically you had a happy 2 hours at the time when the solar pump was running its peak flows, and this evened out then very nicely the day, the water for the day. So you can do these kind of things, and as soon as you have, of course, the smartTAP along with the tokens, you can do other things like limit the absolute maximum amount of water one user can take in a day. So all of these things you can do and control, and then manipulate exactly what's happening, and maybe overcome in the short term some of the water infrastructure challenges you have. It of course takes time to build a new tank. Yeah, so some questions about what do we do about vulnerable people? So we can do different things. We can set daily allowances. So we have a couple of things on the profile of the wallet on the tag. We can set a daily allowance that everybody gets for free. So almost like an umbrella allowance, which we call entitlement. And this would maybe say everybody can have 5 litres per day. This is resetting every day, so 5 litres every day. It doesn't add up over time. You can't wait a week and get 35 litres. It just gives you 5 litres per day, or 2 litres per day, or 20 litres per day. You can choose. So you can set an entitlement level that everybody gets. We then have another feature which allows identified vulnerable people to get different allowances. So as I mentioned earlier, this could be something that the community run, almost like a social wallet, where on top of the free daily allowance, you could have vulnerable people that have been identified as low income or very poor ability to pay for water. They could have a higher allowance, and this is typically set with a time limit on it. So you could say, great, we've reviewed this family, they're really in a desperate situation, we'll give them 50 litres per day until the end of June. So you can set additional allowances with time on, and as I mentioned, that same function there can be used for medical purposes. So if we have a nursing mother or someone with a diarrheal disease, you could also extend their allowances for a period of time. Good, and then yeah, there's lots we can do because, as I said, the token that's being used here is a small computer, so we really can do a lot to set profiles and things. So I realise we're getting close to our time now. Let me move on to another example, and this is an example of a containerized solution. Again, please really, I have to say thank you to all of our partners that have been doing this. This is a fairly recent installation from Solar Water Solutions, and what they have here is a containerized reverse osmosis water treatment system. I think most of you know that reverse osmosis is a relatively expensive treatment of water because it's doing an amazing thing. It's in this case removing salt from the borehole, so it's removing just a kind of brackish water from the borehole. They're removing the salt from it plus other impurities. So this treatment is quite energy intensive and relatively costly to do. But what they've done here is then implemented the smartTAP water dispensers. You can see them on the side of the container here. and which means that the water is firstly used very wisely, and of course there's a revenue collection for it. So this really allows two things. It means that water isn't wasted, but it also means that the whole solution can be replicated again and again. Installing this kind of solutions is more expensive than, of course, just pumping water from a borehole. But again, if there's a revenue stream associated with the project, a method for money collection, then you can see how this can then scale. So more vendors are interested in this kind of solution if they can see there's a ready-made way to collect revenue. Good, so 3 small examples there. Again, there are many other examples that are very similar to these. I chose these 3 because I think they're quite representative of what's going on. One of the questions was, where is the smartTAP being sold most? So at the moment, we're really working in many different versions of the examples we have here. So we are working with utilities. So from smaller kind of county or regional utilities right through to national utilities, we're working with all of those. We're in different degrees of rollout. Some of them are on a trial of 2 or 3 units. Some of them are into the thousands of units now, so they're starting to scale. And of course, we're developing the products, particularly the back-end management systems, all of the time to really meet all of the different requirements. So as the requirements, particularly for larger institutions, come through of being able to manage their regional structures, etc., we're developing and modifying the back-end software to allow more flexibility in terms of how organizations work internally, because no utilities work in the same way. So all those things are developing as we go along. Again, features and functions on the product are also adding in. I've talked about a few of them of how we manage different applications for free water, paid water. Some people want ramped tariffs, some want overusage tariffs, some want the happy hour tariff. So you have to include all of this technology, but very important is keeping it simple to manage. So we always have our eye on how do we keep this really simple to manage? How do we, of course, keep it secure? And how do we make it extendable for all applications? So we're working with the utilities. We're also working with NGOs. So again, we're deploying these solutions simply to make sure that there's fair use of water. So simply using the product in some applications, like I mentioned there, the kind of refugee situation, and whether that's a camp environment or whether it's a hosted, refugees hosted in the community, both applications work really well. Where you have a camp environment, of course, you can really reduce the water that's wasted. You can allocate everybody X litres per day, and then there is fair and equitable access to water. This also stops anybody deciding, the big ugly guy that takes over control of the tap for everybody as a service. So this kind of this kind of economy can't happen if everyone has their own token and access and only 15 litres or 20 litres per day. So it makes it fair and equal access to everybody. So that's working well with the different NGO situations. And of course, then we have lots of examples of small commercial operators using this, extending the life of water kiosks, for example. So many water kiosks have operated successfully, but they typically have a closing time. So extending their closing time, extending their ability to serve more customers, maybe reducing their operating costs of having more people working on treating and purifying water and less on serving customers by introducing the smartTAPs. Also the ability to reduce fraud by making sure all transactions are tracked, traced, and everyone's accountable for what they do. And then we have lots of communities themselves, so community-run models where, the communities either have internal complications. Again, as soon as we involve people in any process, it seems to get complicated. If we can put the machine in to be the one that collects the money, if we can put the machine in and stop the favoritism, families getting free water, the community members never pay for water, etc., the fairness and equality that this brings usually makes for a much more harmonious situation. And when we look at user feedback from these schemes, one of the things that comes up all the time is we love the smartTAPs because it makes it fair for everybody. And we know if we have humans involved, fairness goes out the window quite quickly. So by moving the delivery of water and the topping up of tokens to a fully machine-driven, transaction-led system, this makes it fair and transparent for everybody, and everyone's happy to pay a fair amount for the water they use. Okay, I've got lots of some really good technical questions here. What I would probably do on some of these, they are quite detailed for the call today. I think if you would like to, we maybe would set up a separate webinar for doing both technical planning and also the return on investment calculations. So we probably do, I think we've got time over the next weeks to do this. Maybe not next week we plan, but the week after Easter, we'll do a second webinar on the topic of technical planning for smartTAPs. So we can look at how we would plan that for a community. And we'll also include in that then the ROI and commercial planning for a community. So we can bring those two together, I think, into a nice 1 hour webinar. Okay, well, I've got some more questions on here. Maybe a couple more to answer. What's the policy on lost tokens is one question. So we have to, of course, first thing is we have to think of the token as cash. Yeah, it has a cash value. The policy on what you do about a lost token will depend a little bit on the scheme. So the first thing you can do is you can cancel a lost token. So if someone reports it lost, this is actually a feature we added in recently, where you'll be able to block a token that is lost. Typically, people are not holding large amounts of money on their token. They are topping it up quite regularly. So typically people have 3 or 4 days maximum of credit. And we are, of course, talking about really small amounts of money. So the first thing is we tell everybody you should treat the token like cash. And of course, the same topic comes in, what if someone loses a $5 note? What happens about it? You have to kind of say that's a bit tough. You've lost your money. What, of course, we can do here is be a little more accommodating, because we can, or the operator of the system can, of course, give the user an amount of credit back. So because all the transactions are logged, you have a fairly good idea of their normal usage and behavior, and you could credit them some water back. We are typically talking about, tenth fractions of a US dollar cent per liter. So we are talking about really tiny amounts of money. We're not talking about dollars. We're talking about fractions of cents here on most of the transactions. So small amounts. There are two ways that people are rolling out the scheme. One is where they are providing the tokens free of charge. This, of course, is a necessity maybe in some environments, but the most successful model is where you actually charge the users a modest amount for the token. And typically this should be around $1 to $1.50 equivalent. But the way to do this is then to also add water credit to that same value. It's a little bit like buying a prepaid SIM card for a mobile phone. Of course, in some places, SIM cards are still free. This model has kind of gone away. SIM cards used to be free, but they also have a cost to them. You know, they really cost $1.50 typically to put a SIM card together. Same with these tokens, they do have a cost. So the best way to do it is to say, great, we're going to charge you $1.50 for it, or $2, or whatever the market will take, but we're going to add $1.50's worth of water on. So you're not really paying for the tag itself, the token, you're paying for the water on it. Again, this depends on the environment you're in, whether for many communities $1.50 will really be a lot. But if we look at the reality of what people are paying for water in many places, this is really a lot of money that they're paying. So again, different methods and models that have to fit the local environment. If you're, of course, in a refugee situation, you're not going to charge for tokens. Wherever you possibly can, I would recommend you tell your customers to do this. Otherwise, people don't value them. If it's like, "I'll just give me another one," there's no value to them, and they'll get lost more easily. Lost tokens is typically really not a problem, so really tiny amounts. And also damaged tokens, it really doesn't happen very often. You can we did some trials on running over them with cars and things, and they're quite robust. All of us have been using them on our daily key rings with car keys and door keys and things now for a couple of years, and really they're super robust, heat proof, waterproof. So yeah, they survive quite well. Any other questions I can answer here? Yeah, some questions about pressure and multiple taps. Again, I think I'll transfer them to the planning call if you don't mind. Some questions about some questions about reliability and robustness. So yeah, the product is of course designed to do a couple of different things. One, it's designed to be tough. So we also have some videos, you may have seen this, of attacking the product with hammers and things. So of course, it is made of plastic. People have a negative feeling about plastic, but we chose plastic for its robustness, not because it was cheap. Actually, it's more expensive than an aluminium or steel case, this polycarbonate we're using here, but it's the same material that police make their riot shields from, for instance. So it's designed to be robust and tough and work in the environment. We also have designed it to be very easy to service. So if you look inside the product, and maybe we'll cover this more in the next webinar, we design it with, for instance, color-coded boards, so low literacy technicians can even replace parts inside very easily. So we really have found in the last 2.5 years, really almost zero failures. Of course, there are some failures, but it's really held up much better than we expected. We've even changed our forecasts on some of the longer warranty contracts that we cover. The forecasts have been changed because the product has exceeded our expectations. Of course, a product like this sees 200 or 300 users per day touching it, playing with it. Water services to it are not consistent, dirt, etc., but the products have held up really well. So we have solenoid valves are going extremely well. We're past about 5 million operations in our test environments. Again, the first one you saw, Shirati, has been there 2.5 years, serving masses of water without any challenges. So the product's really holding up well, and as I said, to be honest, it's better than we expected. It's very easy. All the parts are available to service it. It's designed to be serviced with minimal tools. So typically one screwdriver is all you need to service it, and a wrench if you want to take the hydraulic circuit apart inside. And the hydraulic circuit itself, which is a calibrated combined meter and solenoid valve, you can even take those sub parts apart for cleaning, etc. So it's designed to be very simple. Good. I'm conscious that we are really a little bit over time now. Yeah, sorry if I haven't answered all of your questions specifically, but a couple of people here will definitely follow up directly with for people where I can tag we haven't answered a couple of your questions. So we'll follow up with you directly if that's okay. As I said, the webinar will be available for you. It would be great to get you onto the next webinar on Thursday if you're available as well. This will be available to you and colleagues that didn't join us today. So yeah, thanks very much for your time today, and hope to catch you on the next webinar. Thank you.